welcome to Giants Latest as we continue to await Aaron Rodgers and his life-changing decision. Let's talk about whether or not he's actually even the best fit for the Giants. Now, I know there are some people, I did a poll over on my Instagram, who said, I don't want any of the veteran quarterbacks that we're even discussing, which is Aaron Rodgers, Russ Wilson, Joe Flacco, and Jameis Winston. And look, I know that they are not the cream of the crop and the best quarterbacks to exist out there, but the reality is under no circumstances should you be going into the season with a rookie quarterback and Tommy DeVito, especially if you can't get Ward or Sanders. So you have to have a veteran in the building that is going to make us fans feel like maybe we have someone who can lead the charge and win us a couple games and who also is going to be able to help out the rookie. And I think when we talk about someone like Rodgers, for me, that's a huge question mark. He has said before to the media that it's not his job to mentor rookies. He doesn't exactly strike me as someone who is, Mr. Pleasant and wants to teach anyone about football. Now, there are reports of players who contradict that and say, he's great in the locker room and this and that. And I am not sold on that. He literally got his head coach fired. So I just am not sold on Aaron Rodgers being this holier than thou great mentor for a rookie. So, that's my concern. Like I said, especially if they're going after a Ward or a Sanders. And look, ultimately, we're talking about a one-year bridge guy here. But I think when you look at someone like Jameis or Flacco, they give you a better idea that they're probably going to be a little bit more invested in mentoring someone young. In my opinion, I think Flacco is the perfect person out of those four guys for it. I felt like Russ Wilson was also going to be that guy, but I've heard some inklings that he doesn't really want to do that. And I get it, but I think at some point in your career, like, beggars can't be choosers. Like, these Rodgers and Wilson are both guys who could retire and like everyone would be cool with it. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have offers from a bunch of other teams begging them to come play with them. I think the Giants are the only team that are begging, which is embarrassing. They're begging Rodgers, but anyway, I think Rodgers would do well with the Giants. I don't really know how him and Brian Daboll would get along, but I like to think that Rodgers has respect for Daboll from an offensive-minded perspective, and they would get along that way. But I just am not sold that Rodgers is the best fit for helping out a rookie, which is going to be part of the contract deal. So we'll see. Speaking of that, in Mel Kiper's new mock draft, he has Shur Sanders going to the Giants at number 3 overall. Now, we know when it comes to mocks, we have to take everything with a grain of salt. No one really knows anything. I think that the draft is going to go one of two ways. I think that Ward and Sanders are going to go one and two, and the Giants are going to be looking at either Carter or Hunter. Or I think that Ward is still going to go 1, and the Browns will go maybe Hunter or Carter, and then Sanders will fall to the Giants at 3. Now, the way I see it is I'm on board with Shedeur Sanders. Cam Ward is my number 1 choice. I would much rather prefer him, but I do think the more I have seen and heard out of Shedeur Sanders, I do feel like he would do well with the Giants, and I think that him and Brian Daboll would get along. And the Giants have done a lot of scouting on Shedeur Sanders, which makes me feel like they are really sold on him. So it wouldn't surprise me if he falls to the Giants at 3. I think if he falls there, the Giants are taking him. And, I think there's a risk when it comes to any rookie quarterback. I feel the same way about Cam Ward. I do think he's going to be a good quarterback. I think Shedeur is going to be a good quarterback. I think that you don't really know until they get out there and play and you see how things go. The one thing I do like about Shedeur that I think would make him be more successful from the get-go with the Giants is that he has dealt with a bad offensive line. And I think that if the Giants offensive line can block successfully, and I don't need them to be the Lions or the Eagles offensive line, I just need them to literally block and give him more time than what he's used to, then I think we could see a really good Shedeur Sanders. And I think over time he could end up being a really good player in the NFL, and I think he could be one for the Giants. But I do think that having a good offensive line, having a plan for him and things like that will help. And I feel that way with any type of rookie quarterback. You cannot, under any circumstances, throw them in week 1 without a life preserver and say, float. So I think that they have to do their due diligence to do what's best for them and hope that one of the quarterbacks fall to them. But as time goes on, I do feel like Shedeur could be a good fit for the Giants. Now, speaking of that, I want to talk about this because I was watching Get Up earlier today and I thought this was a really fascinating, what's the word I'm looking for? Comparison, I guess. So on Get Up, they had a guest on, Hasselback, I think his name was, and he used to play in the NFL, has a ton of experience, whatever. And he was saying that Shedeur Sanders and Eli Manning actually have more in common, and what they have in common could actually really help Shedeur succeed with the Giants. And I thought this was fascinating. So, obviously, Eli Manning is a Manning. He comes from the Manning name. His dad is, Archie Manning, who is one of the greatest players and has a ton of experience being well known in the league and outside of the league. Hometown hero, the whole deal. When you look at Eli and you look at Peyton and you look at Cooper, they are all Mannings. This is why everyone is talking about Arch Manning, and Giants fans are begging, saying, let's tank this year so we can get Arch next year, which it doesn't work like that, and that's not going to happen. But people are already like, Arch Manning is the guy. Part of it is because he's a Manning, part of it is because he's a good football player. When you look at Shedeur comes from similar circumstances where his dad was an unbelievable football player in the NFL, unbelievable teammate. His players had nothing but good things to say about him. He's, won a lot of things. I think he won multiple MVPs. Like Deion Sanders, everyone knows and loves. And yes, he's maybe a little bit more confident and cocky. I think he's also a lot younger than Archie Manning. I think that's part of it. But, I think that maybe can rub people the wrong way, but look at the career that Sanders had. He's allowed to be like that, right? And I think when you look at someone like Shedeur, obviously there's concerns of entitlement there. And I think, the thing with Eli is you felt like maybe he was a little bit more humble. But, he said, I'm not playing for the Chargers. And he didn't end up playing for the Chargers. And I think that Shedeur and Deion will be very similar. If they don't want him to go to Cleveland, he's not going to Cleveland. And I think that they really would like him in the New York market. And I do think that Shedeur, having been primed, see what I did there, by Deion, will allow him to be more prepared for the New York media. And I don't care what anyone says, unless you have been in different locker rooms and you have been in the New York Giants locker room versus Kansas City, like Lawrence Tynes talks about on a regular basis, they are not even comparable. Now, Kansas City might be a little different after they won a couple Super Bowls. Let's talk about Indianapolis, okay? You want to talk about the Colts locker room? And their media sessions versus the Giants, they're not even comparable. So you have to be prepared. And we saw what happened with Malik Neighbors. Yes, he went to the LSC. He came from LSU and had those different types of experiences. You get to New York, it's different. He learned the hard way that he can't throw his coach under the bus and say, oh, well, don't look at me as to why I didn't get the targets. I don't call the plays. You can't say shit like that, And it took him the hard way to learn that. So anyway, I think that it's a very interesting comparison. And I think that Shedeur, having come from a successful father who did well in the NFL, who has a media brand, and who has all of these things that have gone before him, that have gone well, he's well known in the industry. I do think that's going to prime Shedeur to succeed if he ends up coming to the Giants. Now, we know that the Giants lost Azeez Ojulari yesterday, and we got to talk about the defense for a second because this is very frustrating. So between Azeez and Adoree Jackson and Bradbury and Saquon, it's like, we get it, okay? Should we start calling them the New York Eagles? Everyone is like, oh, we should be called the Bills of the South because the Giants took on a bunch of Bills players. I get it, okay? I am super bummed about Azeez. I am bummed because the Eagles only paid him $4 million. And the way I look at it is Giants, really, you couldn't give him $4 million. I understand the guy is injury prone, but he's an impact player when he's on the field. And in my opinion, the only way to fix that is to get Carter at 3, which we don't know if he's even going to be available. But I don't think this guy that they just signed, outside linebacker Victor Dimukic, I don't know if I pronounced that right, he's not going to come in and replace Azeez, okay? And he's not going to be, a backup, if they can't get Carter or anything. But I just think this is what they do this time of year. They make signings to bring in competition and to build up depth at different positions. So let's talk about Victor. He's 6'2", 262 pounds, played in 55 games with 8 starts since he was drafted in the 6th round of the 2021 draft by the Cardinals. Now, speaking of the 2021 draft, every single player that the Giants drafted in 2021 is no longer on the roster. Some of them are not even in the NFL anymore, which is just some things. When I talk crap about Dave Gettleman, remember that. That's one of the reasons why. But anyway, same draft class as Aziz, which is very interesting. Same position. So, like I said, this guy has only started in 8 games out of 55. He's not Aziz. He's not, I don't think, going to try and be Aziz, but it's just depth. His best year was 2023. He played in 16 games with 6 starts, recorded all 4 of his career sacks, 5 tackles for loss, 8 quarterback hits, and 1 forced fumble. Now, he also has experience playing special teams. So, in the last 3 years with the Cardinals, he played 65% of Arizona's special teams. Now, the Giants did try to force Aziz to play special teams, and he was okay. Just don't really think that's a great position for him. To me, the more I hear about Victor is he's more of an Isaiah Simmons replacement, because Isaiah Simmons was a special teams guy. They played him all over in different pieces on defense, and he never really had success. I think the Giants just couldn't figure out what to do with him, which is like a problem for another day. But anyway, I think they really are focusing on improving special teams. This is the 3rd player now in the week of free agency that they have brought in to help build up their special teams presence. So I think that was a great move by the Giants. And like I said, we'll see what he can do ultimately, but special teams needed some help, especially with all the kickoff rule changes. And I think there might even be more changes coming to that this year. So the more the merrier, especially when it comes to cheap signings. But as always, we still don't have a quarterback, so make sure you subscribe for more.